Welcome to the Selling Show, where we unpack, repack, and break down exactly how CEOs, founders, and senior executives sell their ideas, point of view, and personal brand to the people who matter most. This is your host, David Newman, and you are in the right place if you want to build market eminence, amplify your influence, and attract high-value prospects, investors, partners, talent, and media opportunities with less chasing and more confidence. Let's go. Are you bookable? What's your bookability quotient? Do you know? I don't know if you know, but I know someone who does know and can help you. The amazing Maria Franzoni, author of the Bookability Formula. I'm going to give the subtitle as well because it's so fantastically amazing. What the 1% most booked speakers do, and you can too. Maria, welcome to the show.
Wow, I don't know if I can follow that introduction. That's fantastic. I might just listen to it over and on loop.
We might just call it a day. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for tuning in, and catch us next time. No, you are you have written one of the most clear, most step-by-step, most seasoned and sophisticated handbooks for experts who want to speak professionally or who are speaking professionally and want to do more of it and more, bigger, better. Tell us a little bit about your professional journey, Maria, that brought you to the work that you're doing today, and then we'll use that as our launching point into all of these great ideas.
Okay, our launch point. So I didn't actually get into the speaking industry until a bit later. I'm not very young, but we won't go into that. So I'd had a few careers beforehand, and it was all, it was by accident. I had been a management consultant and I was looking not to travel so much. I was always away from home. And the advert that sort of got my interest was one that said, you know, are you able to negotiate at senior level? Not knowing any more than that, I'd never heard of speaker bureaus. And when I went to the interview, I then realized that senior level meant speaking to former presidents, former heads of state on the speaker side, first man on the moon, Neil Armstrong, or, you know, some former CEOs and gurus that I had studied when I studied business studies, some of the people whose books I'd read. And then on the other side, the client side, senior directors, CEOs on that side too, who were then booking the speakers. And so that was back in 1998, I got into that and I was absolutely hooked. I don't know if you found this, but when you get into this industry of speakers and speaking, it's just amazing. You're learning all the time. You're learning from the clients, you're learning from the speakers. Anyway, fast forward, we all know that there was a horrible experience in 2020, 2021. And many of the speakers I'd been working with for many years came to me because their businesses had collapsed and asked for help. And I discovered that I knew what to do and I knew how to help them quite quickly to make them bookable again. And so I then decided to look at what was it actually about bookability, about what made a speaker bookable in the bureau in the past. I looked at the data because, of course, we're on commission when we're in bureaus. So it was quite useful to understand that. And I realized there was a pattern and a formula. And I then moved from working in the bureau to working with speakers and teaching them really what bureaus know about bookability and what very clever marketing people like you know about bookability too, because you apply all of this yourself to your business, I know.
Well, I try, but we were talking right before we turned the cameras on that I've read this book twice now, actually, and you can see the dog-eared pages. For the folks watching the video, you can see the dog-eared pages, and they're mostly in the first 2/3 of the book. So there's also the knowing-doing gap, and but there's also a lot of new, very smart information here about getting seen, about prospecting, lead generation, initial contact with clients, what to say, what to do, what not to say, what not to do, which is sometimes equally important, if not more so. So I want to pick up on what you just said about sort of pandemic wipeout, reboot, reimagine. I'm guessing, and correct me if I'm wrong, as a former management consultant, when all these speakers' businesses were wiped out in 2020, some of the encouragement was, well, expand your service offerings beyond just pure speaking on stages. So think about a consulting package or program. Think about a, perhaps an online course. Think about other ways to repackage what you're speaking about into ways that do not involve being face-to-face. Now that we're post-pandemic, and have been for a few years now, there are a whole bunch of speakers that have been battered, bruised, and just sort of rebuilding. They're probably great speakers. They probably were bookable before the pandemic, but they've gotten rusty. And so, or maybe they've gotten rusty in the marketing. Maybe their client base has retired. I have a lot of friends and colleagues where, they're in their late 60s, early 70s, and like, all my contacts retired. All my contacts at these companies and these associations, they're gone. I have to go back to square one. What is your advice for the seasoned speaker who, him or herself, is not at square one, but their marketing is at square one?
Oh, such a good question. So I think go back to what it is that you bring. What is the value that you bring? What is the problem that you solve? How is that problem showing up at the moment today for audiences? Because I think it's a very different world we're in, as you said, post-pandemic to pre-pandemic. Yeah. And sort of, reposition yourself so that you are completely relevant to what's happening today for your potential clients, how they're talking about it. Language has changed, problems have changed. So you need to make sure you are, I suppose it's going back to point one of the formula, going back to basics, make sure you're relevant before you start talking. Make sure you're relevant to a pressing problem today in the right language for the right people. And also that you're totally clear on who those people are, because that might have changed as well. The people that you can serve now may well have changed, as you said. And the point you made about people retiring and what is so true. We're still going, aren't we? Because we're still young, really.
Yes, of course. So let's walk through, and thank you for mentioning the framework, because that's a very important part of our initial discussion here. Could you just walk us through some of your favorite parts of the framework that you talk about in the Bookability Formula?
Yes, I think my two favorite elements, if you like, of a formula are, one is that relevant one, which we've already mentioned about being relevant to a paying market, because it's no point if you want to make this into a business. This is, for me, it's a commercial thing. It's a speaking business. It's always been about ensuring that we were able to run the bureau, therefore make commissions. So you have to be relevant to a paying market. Yeah. So that's one of my favorite elements. They're all wonderful, of course. They're all my children. And then the other one that is one that I think people think they are good at and they're not necessarily, and that's easy. So that's easy to book, easy to work with, and easy to listen to. Because as a speaker, you've got to be easy to listen to when you're on stage as well. And I think that that's an area that many fall down on. They don't realize the barriers that they put in place or the friction they create by not being as easy as they could be.
So easy to work with, easy to book. I love easy to listen to. What are some signs, if we're self-aware professionals, hopefully we are self-aware professionals, what signs do we need to look for, either among our audience or among our buyers, that indicate that we're not as easy to listen to as we think we are?
I think one of the big ones is, and it comes from a good intention, is that as a speaker, as an expert, you want to give as much as possible to your audience, to your client. And so you take all your knowledge on that topic and you prepare it, and then you go on Google and you add that. Then you go into ChatGPT and you add that. And then you read all of your books and you add that. And what happens is, instead of having a nice, clear one message or two messages or three messages, three maximum, I would say, in that speech, you are overwhelming your audience. And if you're overwhelming your audience, they don't know what to do with it. And the sign from a speaker's point of view is you're not getting asked back. You're not getting referrals. You're probably not getting a testimonial that you can do anything with necessarily. So I do think the main indicator is that rebooking. one of my favorite books, I know we're talking about my book today, one of my favorite books is The Referable Speaker by Andrew Davis and Michael Port, where they talk about that referable speech.
Yeah.
It's a really big sign. If people are coming up to you afterwards and saying, come and speak to my event, come and do this in my department, let's do more, you've got it right. If you're overwhelming them, that's impossible.
All right, hang on. We got to back up the truck here. Beep, 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 beep. Do you have a copy of my new book, Market Eminence? No? Well, you can grab that. It's available in audio, paperback, and Kindle at marketeminence.com. That's right, my friends, marketeminence.com. Go check it out and then come right back to this episode. So important. And so this is where I'd love to delve in to a little bit of nuance here. There are, obviously, the speaking business attracts a huge, wide swath of people. You mentioned CEOs and generals and rock stars and former presidents and so forth. Even in the expert community, the thought leader community, some people start out as a trainer or a workshop leader, and then they add speaking. Some people come in from a consulting background and then add speaking. Some people come in from a coaching background and then add speaking. What you're putting your finger on is that a keynote speech, right? A 45 to 60 minute keynote speech, very different than a seminar, very different than a training workshop, very different than let's pack 10 pounds of sugar into a 5-pound bag. What are some of for the people that are not experienced keynoters, but maybe they're experienced consultants, they're experienced trainers, how would you describe the unique animal that is a keynote container for your expertise?
Oh, you do ask good questions. These are unique questions, David. You've worked hard here. First of all, many people don't really know what a keynote is. And the problem is that there are people coming up who are younger generation who don't know what a traditional keynote is. And that's the first problem. So when you're working with a client, I would say, when you say keynote, what do you mean by keynote? Because traditionally in the old world of speaker bureaus where we were talking about keynotes, and the reason why we all focused on keynotes was because that was the main speech that usually had to talk to the theme of the event. So, if you were a speaker who was a motivational speaker, but the theme was, the theme was, oh gosh, I'm trying to think of a theme. I've gone blank here. Intuition or something. You would have to bring that theme into your topic and make it relevant. And if you're the opening speaker, your role is to set that conference up, to talk to the theme of the topic, the keynote, right? That theme of the topic, set it up and set the people up as that client wants them to be set up, whether they want them to be on the edge of their seats or wants them to be provoked or ready to listen or enthusiastic, whatever. So that was the opening keynote. The role of the closing keynote was to send people away with a certain mindset or to wrap everything up. And therefore, we would require you to stay at the whole conference in order to understand what the rest of the messaging is or to do a lot of homework. So there were specific roles originally, but now everybody calls a speech a keynote.
Yes.
And yet there's lots of different types of speeches. So I think the client needs to define it for you. If you want to call yourself a keynote speaker, you have got to be able, as a closing keynote, if they want you to wrap everything up, you've got to be able to do that. That's a skill. That's not I wouldn't be able to do that personally at all. Or unless they booked you to send them off in a certain way, in a certain mindset. And as the opening keynote, more often than not, you're either an industry expert that people are going to get up early and come and listen to. You're usually known to that audience because they want to put bums on seats first thing in the morning. They want you there at the beginning of the conference. Sometimes it's a celebrity name, I'm afraid, still. Although, that's happening less and less from what I'm hearing in the market in terms of value, use of budget. Because budgets are tighter. So I don't know if I've answered your question or not. I hope I have.
Well, so let's say it was very valid points, but I was sort of heading in a slightly different direction. I'm a trainer. I mean, I'm not a trainer, but let's say I'm a trainer and I'm used to opening up a binder, page 3, right? Let's get into it. And I'm doing an all-day training. And then someone comes up to me and says, hey, you're a really great speaker. You got this great presence. You have this great voice. You're funny. You should take your full day training and you should start speaking on that topic. So now we go from here's the binder, full day training, to here's 60 minutes, keynote. And what does that trainer need to cut and leave out? And what does that trainer need to add to start becoming a much more effective keynoter?
I think that the starting point is to really be clear on what the objective is for the audience, the message you need to deliver. You then, I think structure is really vital. Structure is so important. You need to keep that audience with you. A pure keynote, again, old-fashioned pure keynote, was never interactive. These days, some people do make it interactive. In the old days, it wasn't. And so you, in the same way, I'm hoping trainers use stories. Not all of them do, but you do need to have stories, you do need to have points, you do need to have structure. And I'm not a coach in the sense of teaching people how to deliver speeches. So you're taking me slightly out of my comfort zone here. Mine's the money. I'm the money person.
Right. Exactly. Well, let's talk about this interactive, because there is cringe-worthy interactive, which, terrible speakers like, hey, how many of you have, by a show of hands? That's not interactive, folks. Just quick memo. That's not interactive. For the speakers that you've booked in your bureau days, and now as a consultant and a coach, the speakers that are the most successful coaching clients, what's their definition of interactivity or engaging, sort of breaking that fourth wall and really connecting with an audience?
Getting them to do some kind of activity, hopefully not standing up and moving around too much, maybe getting them to chat. But again, for me, that's not really a keynote. I don't tell anybody, David, I don't like interactivity in a keynote or in a speech. I like it in the workshop. I want to be, the interactivity I do like is laughter. I think that's the best feedback for a really good speaker. For me, humor is so important. So important. So I'm actually don't tell anyone, hopefully nobody will know, I don't particularly like interaction.
No one listens to this show anyway, so it'll never get out. It'll never get out.
But it's not my decision. It's the client's decision. So if a client is asking for interactivity and that is something that you do, it's something you've got to discuss with the client as to what would work best with their audience. You're not going to have a group of CEOs standing up, perhaps doing, and I know lots of people do breathing exercises and meditation.
Sure.
I don't like that either.
No, me neither. Me neither.
We're so similar.
It's funny because and this is someone told me this way back in the day of teleseminars and the early days of webinars. If you're doing a B2B, a business webinar, usually people are gathered in a conference room and they have you up on a screen, or they're listening to, back in the teleseminar days, the audio conferences they were called. They had you on that little three-legged speaker thing in the middle of the table. That is a one-to-many. That is a one-to-many modality because they're looking at each other. They're making faces at each other. If it's not landing, there's a whole bunch of people making fun of you together. In a darkened auditorium, in a hotel ballroom, there's 900 people there. You're on the stage. You are having a one-to-one experience with every single person in every single seat. It is literally, and so the highest praise I've ever gotten, that I take as the highest praise, is, the room was packed, but it felt like I was talking to David one-on-one. Because I'm having that personal conversation with every single individual in that auditorium. And I think that when you say, okay, interactivity, getting up and, shaking your booty and stretching and hugging your neighbor, that's not a one-to-one, right? And so I think I find that very, very painful when I'm in the audience, and I would not want to do that to any of my audiences either. You talk about visibility And we're kind of changing gears here for a quick second because we have so much to talk about, so much great stuff in your book. And you talk about being visible on LinkedIn. I want to cross-check that with the buyers that we think are the buyers are not always the buyers, not always the decision makers. So sometimes the person has the function without the title. Sometimes they have the title without the function. It's a weird world. The speaking world is weird as far as who's the actual economic decision maker. What can we do to maximize our chances if we're active on LinkedIn? What kind of content is not necessarily going to appeal to audience members or civilians, but it will absolutely appeal to decision makers?
Well, again, it's talking, if you can talk to them about what's going on for them, what their problem is, if you can talk about things that you have also done, people that you have helped, if you've got case studies, etc. But I always, I sort of subscribe to the Gary Vaynerchuk school of social media. He says, give value, give value, give value. I agree with that. And everybody's always trying to sort of like play the algorithm. And it's not about playing the algorithm. It's about showing up, being you, and giving something of value and starting a conversation. What you said about having a conversation from stage, I totally agree with you. Those are the best speeches, conversations from stage where you feel like you're part of the conversation, even though you're in the audience and you're not really responding. I think social media should be a conversation. The word social's there for a reason. Yeah. And too many people broadcast rather than try to engage. And it's not about having hundreds of thousands of followers unless you're being brought in to speak about how you got hundreds of thousands.
Right.
It's about having the right people who you can converse with, engage with, and add value to. And part of the way to really grow is not just to be broadcasting yourself and conversing on your own platform and your own profile, but actually commenting and engaging with other people and getting involved in their conversations, finding your potential customers, finding your existing customers, and get involved in their conversations as well would be some of the ways to give value. But it is about being consistent and showing up. I mean, this is your expert area, really. It is about being consistent, being you, adding value, and engaging in conversation, not posting and running.
And also, when you say engaging in conversation, I love what you said about commenting and conversing on other people's posts. I think a big step that people forget is when we post something and we get a comment or a question or something else, engaging with the commenters. This seems like it's basic 101, super obvious, but a lot of people don't do it. They just post and run. And there could be prospects. Now, you also mentioned in your book, which I think is totally spot on, a lot of the economic buyers will just lurk, right? They will read your content. You'll never get a like. You'll never get a comment. There's no clue. But when the phone rings 3 months later, they will say things like, "Oh, I love your stuff on LinkedIn." And you say, "I've never seen a comment. I've never seen a peep out of you on LinkedIn." They don't comment because they're busy, right? They read it, they absorb it, they may even forward it to someone, but they're not going to comment because they're busy, high-level professionals. Are there other platforms? I mean, LinkedIn obviously is the business-to-business social network. I see so many of our colleagues and speakers, I'm going to say waste, but I'll be generous and say spend a lot of time on Facebook and spend a lot of time on Instagram. Do you feel the demographics are changing where our economic buyers are now more looking at Facebook or Instagram and not so much on LinkedIn?
It's interesting. It varies for different people. People who are very good on video often actually do really well on platforms like Instagram. I have got speakers who do really well on Instagram. Yeah. And I think also it depends what your topics might be. There are still many people who aren't on LinkedIn, but are very successful as they're on Instagram. I do see people on Facebook. I like Facebook groups personally. I have a Facebook group and I find that's quite easy because I found LinkedIn groups, I haven't found them particularly good for building relationships and having conversations, whereas Facebook groups still work well. I think what you want to do, if we're time poor. So yes, I focused very much on LinkedIn. So because if you're going to choose one platform, that's the one currently that works. I hope it carries on working. And because, if you are time poor, because people spread themselves too thin. You said it. People spread themselves too thin and waste time. So if you're going to focus, that's a good one to focus on, but never leave all of your contacts and connections on LinkedIn, make sure you're downloading them and not losing them in case something happens, because we don't own that platform. We don't own those connections. We don't own those relationships. So download your data regularly, and also build an email list as well. Build your database. Your database is the real value of your business. And I think a lot of people are very poor at setting up systems and processes to capture information, are very bad at keeping it up to date, and don't use it. And they're sitting, many of the speakers I work, I'm sorry, I'm going slightly off at a tangent here, David, but many of the speakers that I work with who are struggling to get booked and haven't got enough business, and we look at the data that they have, the connections that they have, the past bookings, the past inquiries, and they are sitting on gold. They don't need to go and get new prospects. They've got so many great relationships and so much possibility, but they're not using it.
How do we separate? I want to dig into the database thing just for a quick second. The challenge I have, and the challenge that a lot of my speaker friends have, is they'll be doing a program, 600 people in the audience. They throw up a QR code, get my free ebook, get my companion tools, download the slides, whatever it is. 200 out of the 600 people download the thing. They now have 200 audience members on their list. No economic buyers. So do we segment, here's my CRM/economic buyer database versus here's my audience-centric people that opted in for my goodie database, or is it all just sort of the same?
No, I definitely separate it. So for me, I have my email list has anybody who's subscribed to it, or those people who answer the QR, they're on there. The people that I move into my CRM are the people who are qualified or then move from getting my newsletters or getting information and then become customers or become prospects. They have a prospecting discussion. They want to talk about the possibilities. I would separate, otherwise you're going to get inundated. What you have got with your 200 people that have subscribed to you, and you know this, you've got a fantastic audience when you launch the next book, right?
Yes.
Because they already know your content, they already love you, they're already a warm audience there.
Right.
You've also got your customers and your prospects in your CRM. I think when I first started using a CRM many years ago, I put everything into it, and then you are treating everybody the same, and you then had to then tag people or decide who were the most important. And at the end of every year, we used to use the 80-20 rule and work out which 20% of the people on the database were giving us 80% of our business, so that we could focus on the right people. If you've got too many, it becomes overwhelming. And you know, in this business, to be successful as a speaker, you actually don't need a huge number of clients to make a really good living.
Wait. We're not just going to listen to this episode. There are downloads, there are resources, there are links, there are bonuses waiting for you on this episode's page when you go over to doitmarketing.com/podcast. That's right, doitmarketing.com/podcast. Grab the notes right under this episode. See you over there.
One of the things that makes some speakers memorable is original research. And I want to go back to what you said about easy to listen to. So first of all, do you agree that original research is kind of a nice feather in your cap?
I love it. Love it. Love original research.
So the challenge then, I've done original research. Again, I haven't, but let's say I've done original research. I have all these amazing data points and charts and graphs and trends and all kinds of wonderful things directly relevant to my audience that I'm speaking for. How do I present research in a way that is easy to listen to, not dry, not dull, not boring? Yes, the data is interesting, but have you seen this combination of research-based keynote that is also easy to listen to?
Yes, there's a few speakers who are really brilliant at it. And one, sadly, no longer with us, Hans Rosling, was amazing at presenting the most incredible data, amazing slides. I had the pleasure of working with him. Another one who's very good, and one of his topics years ago, and I don't know if he's still speaking about it, was a guy called David McCandless, and he talked about data is beautiful, and again, amazing images. I think incredible imagery, which we've got access to now with AI, can really help us, but also stories. People remember stories. And if you can wrap your your research and your data around a story, I think that really helps bring it to life, because otherwise it is very difficult. And the temptation, again, going back to the earlier point, is to throw all that research in. Don't pick 2 or 3 really relevant. Don't give them everything, because they can bring you back. The client can bring you back to do more, right?
Yeah.
Give them just enough so that you can then, because people won't retain it. So if you're sharing it, share a great image, share a great story, just focus deeply on it rather than going and sharing lots and lots of different stuff.
I once got some advice, because I came out of the training world. So I did come out of the training world. And not just 1-day workshops. We're talking like 3-day, 5-day, long corporate workshops. And then I went out on my own in 2002 going, I think I'd like to be a speaker. And I made that mistake early on of fire hosing the hell out of audiences. And so here's the clue that this does not work from a bookability formula. And I wish I had this knowledge earlier, but I didn't. Guy comes up to me. This is like literally 2003, 2004, first couple of years of my business. And we started talking. And, I'm thinking, oh, this will be spin-off business. This will be great. This guy might be a private client. He says, David, this was mind-blowing. You are amazing. It's going to take me 6 months to digest what you just shared. And I was like, that's not good. This is not good. That's not, it sounds like praise. It's not praise. It's like, you have fried my circuits. I'm going to go off into a cave. I never want to talk to you again because I have 6 months of stuff in my head now. Do you want to hire me again? It's like, no, dude, I'm still digesting the elephant you threw at me. So don't throw elephants at people. Throw little kittens and puppies and things that are easy and fun and cute. So after that bruising experience, I went to a very successful keynoter and I said, what am I doing wrong? And the quote she gave me, I still remember this every single time. She said, David, you're a great content guy. You're a great teacher. In a keynote, content is not your friend. And I was like, oh, that's good. That is good. So make them think, which you also write about in your book, and we'll talk about that in a second. Make them, so her advice was, make them think, make them laugh. No content. Make them think, make them laugh. What's your definition of make them think? Because you have a whole section in the book, which I just totally love. And you tell the Neil Armstrong story in there also. Can you give us a little taste of that Neil Armstrong story that's in the Make Them Think?
So there's several Neil Armstrong stories. So I'm trying to think which one you're talking about. Is that the one where he doesn't actually talk about the moon landing?
Yes.
So that story. So yeah. So what's really interesting, I loved working with Neil, and he was one of the few speakers that didn't accept every single engagement. He accepted, 4 engagements a year only.
Wow.
And he wanted to have a lot of time. Every single speech he wrote was completely unique and totally tailored to the client. Left them thinking completely differently about their business. And those are the kind of speakers that I really like. There's another speaker I mentioned called Mark Stevenson, who's a futurist, and he would really be very provocative about, what industry the audience was in and really make them think differently about, actually, in the future, we've got to change the industry. I think there's 3 things that you want to achieve with your audience. You either want them to think differently, feel differently, or do something differently. If you can do all of those, that's amazing. But the think one for me is the one that is often the more senior the audience. That's what they really want. They want to think differently about a topic and view it completely differently. So that is a good one, and I know that's one of the things that you talk about in your amazing book.
How to Think is one of my touchstones. That's why I love it so much in your book.
I love it. That how to think is so important, and it's what we should be talking about. It's one of the things we should be talking about in a keynote. Yeah. It's a great way to focus your content, making people think differently. For me, for speaking, I want people to think about speaking as a business and not as a performance.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And how? Let's talk about AI, artificial intelligence. There are speakers that are scared for their lives, or at least their livelihood. There are speakers who are like, oh, this is great. There is now so much junk out there that real human-centric, thinking content is going to stand out even sharper than it did before. Your client base, what is their take on AI? What is their take, if any, on the threat of AI and AI-generated content to their particular speaking business? And just kind of how do you frame up AI when it comes to clients and what kind of content they want to put in front of their audiences?
You see, it's an interesting one because you can see different types of people reacting very differently to it.
Oh, yes.
And it's the same with any major technology. We've been through a few in our lifetime, for sure. And this is probably the one that's happened the fastest and is the most exciting. I don't think you can ignore it. You cannot resist it. The temptation for many speakers is to include AI in their titles and make it part of their topic. Please don't do that. Clients need experts in that topic. Don't get on the bandwagon. Don't do that. What you do have to do, though, is be aware of how are your clients using AI? How is it affecting the topic that you are talking about, so that you are understanding their real situation. I also think that speakers should embrace and use AI themselves in their businesses, because otherwise, how can they relate to clients who are using it too? And I'm not talking about handing over everything to, your content creation to AI. I'm not talking about doing that. Yeah. But I think behind the scenes, AI, I think, is really useful for making you more efficient, for sure. And behind the scenes, I believe the same thing with automation. Behind the scenes automation, I don't think you should ever automate a relationship. I don't think you can delegate your communication and your relationships to AI. I don't think you should do that. And we see it and we don't like it and we recognize it more and more. Will AI replace speakers? I mean, there's all sorts of amazing things going on. I don't believe that we can replace relationships. And in fact, people more than ever want to get together, want to be in the room together, want to interact. I think more than ever before, it seems to be a real, organizations really want face-to-face much more than they have done for many, many years. But yeah, I suppose in summary, you have to embrace it. You have to understand it. Please don't talk about it unless you are an expert, but understand how it's affecting your clients.
I love that you said that twice. I would just say it a third time, because all I'm seeing is everyone is putting like AI set dressing on top of their real expertise, and it's doing them a disservice on both those fronts, because they don't really know AI like an AI expert, and by layering it on, you're diminishing your underlying expertise quite a bit.
Yeah, well said.
So let's talk. It's funny, and we could talk for hours and hours. I've got one or two questions here as we're coming to a close. In my experience, talking to friends, clients, etc., I will sometimes ask them, what's the percentage of your speaking business associations versus corporate? And I'm finding it's almost never a balance. People go, oh, it's 90% associations or it's 90% corporate. It used to be, I thought it used to be, it's like, oh, well, I do some associations and the association gigs, of course, lead to the corporate gigs. And, it's 50-50, 60-40. I'm wondering, why is there this divide now where some speakers spend most of their time on association stages and other speakers spend most of their time on corporate stages? What's up with that, do you think?
I think it depends where you're based, because not all associations pay very well. In the US, they actually pay pretty decently. So if you're a US speaker, it's actually, you can have a decent speaking business speaking to associations. Yeah. If you're outside of the US, actually a lot of associations pay very poorly. So there's that. I think there are more associations. I don't know, I'm going to have to check, but it feels to me like there's more associations in the US than there is in the rest of the world put together. But I'm probably wrong there. I might ask my ChatGPT to do some research. So there is that. Also with associations, it's actually often a talent show, as I like to call it, or a beauty contest. You have to parade and they decide who they want. Whereas for corporate, it's quite different. It's a different style of selling, I think, in my experience, having sold to both. So I personally prefer the corporate, the business, the government, the large organizations to the association selling when I had my bureau. Whereas there are people in my team who prefer the association, because I do think there's an awful lot more pitching goes on in the association place. Whereas in the corporate space, it's very much more about the relationship and developing that and talking. I think it's a different discussion in terms of the business and the objectives and the strategy. Whereas because the association, there's lots of different organizations, it's sort of probably a slightly different discussion. It's not quite as in depth and in detail. And I love the detail bit of the business.
Exactly. I'm wondering, so, a relationship building has been a theme of what we're talking about. If we're in this rebooting mode, right, or just revisiting, wanting to revitalize the speaking portion of our business, assuming we do other things, write books, consult, coach, etc. But now let's say for 2026, people listening are really dedicated to rebooting their speaking profit center. Number one, buy this book, The Bookability Formula. That's step number one. But steps number 2 and 3, Maria, what sort of initial marketing, initial door opening do you recommend? And I'm going to ask it sort of as A and a B. Initial door opening with associations and initial door opening with a corporate prospect. What do you recommend there?
So if you're going to start with associations, I think you should be strategic about which are the right associations in terms of the audience that they have and the audience members. And because you've got to, again, relate it. What's the problem that you're solving? What's the value that you're delivering? Therefore, which association audience is going to benefit the most from that? Yeah. So, and talk to that and find out about how the association books speakers. It's not difficult to do. They often tell you on their website. Look at how they go about it. There's usually an application process. They usually have a time when they're actually looking for speakers. Check if they do events that are annual. Check if they do local. Check if they have chapters. And where an association doesn't necessarily pay as well as you would like, but that audience is the audience you're interested in, ask them for an annual membership for a year's membership of the association, because you've then got access to the other members and you can be networking, and that's quite a good strategy for building your business that way. With regards to the corporates, again, be really clear. Who should I be going after? What should I be doing? If you're talking about rebooting. So I'm assuming with both, you've got a history. Yes. I would do that 80-20 exercise. In the past, where were the organizations that were giving me the best, that I was getting the best reaction from, and focus on those. If you found it was technology, then maybe go deeper in technology, because you'll have testimonials, you'll have case studies, you'll have previous history, but also you could potentially go back to previous organizations that you spoke for 5 years ago and say, hey, listen, I did that event. I don't know if you're planning it again. This is the latest material. This is the latest evolution, etc. So I do believe in sort of resurrecting past relationships. And the value of LinkedIn, of course, is if somebody you worked with 5 years ago has now moved to another organization. Hey, 5 years ago you were planning events for such and such an organization. You don't happen to be involved again, do you, this year? We had such a good time last time. I know you were very happy. Maybe we can have a chat. So a couple of tips there. I mean, obviously, it's different for every individual. Without knowing what that individual's topic is, what their past history is, they may need to step back and relook at their online presence as well, because part of what a booker is going to do, whether they're a meeting professional or a corporate or an association, is they're going to check your online presence. And if that doesn't match up with what you're saying when you're approaching them, you've got a problem. So it's sort of, there's a long tick list, really.
For sure. Well, like any serious business, there's no easy answers, except there's a lot of great answers and a lot of great questions also. The thing I love, Marie, many things I love about this book, and again, dog ears. Not only do you give some fantastic strategic advice, there is some fantastic strategic questioning of what do you want in your business? What kinds of audiences are the most relevant fit? How does your messaging need to change based on what your target market is going through right now, torn from the headlines in real time? This whole concept of relevance, I would challenge people listening to us, if you're still marketing the same stuff that you were in 2021 or 2022, you're already out of date, much less 2015 or 1995. But so many great nuggets that are in your book. If folks were to take one overall concept from our time together today about the Bookability Formula and what it takes to be a successful speaker in 2026, what do you hope that overarching takeaway concept should be for them?
I think focus on making it as easy and frictionless for people to find you, to book you, to work with you, to listen to you. That's quite a big list there already. I keep giving lists, David.
I know. It's great, though. It's great. You're totally keeping it real. So where can people go to get connected and stay connected to more Maria Franzoni brilliance? What links should go in the show notes, book, resources, website? We can do as much as you want for folks that want to connect more with you.
That's very kind of you. Obviously, I'm on LinkedIn because I talk about it all the time. So Maria Franzoni on LinkedIn. My website is mariafranzoni.me. There are a lot of free resources there, including the Speaking Business podcast, where you have been a recent guest.
And it was an awesome episode, if I say so myself.
It was actually. And it produced an awesome newsletter as well. So thank you for that.
Yes, of course. So great. So all of those will be in the show notes directly under this episode at thesellingshow.com. Maria Franzoni, this was so fantastic. We need to have you back. We want to have you back. We just scratched the surface of what smart speakers and accomplished speakers need to know, do, think, and feel for 2026 and beyond. So part 2 of our conversation coming to a podcast near you soon, I hope.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Awesome.
And that wraps up another episode of The Selling Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe, tell a friend, go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thesellingshow.com. See you next time.